Welcome to the So You Want to Be a Data Scientist podcast. Here we interview awesome data scientists and other data professionals. This show is part of the website soyouwannabeadatascientist.com. After listening, take my free data science Kickstarter course to learn what it takes to become a data scientist. In the meantime, enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of So You Want to Be a Data Scientist podcast. Today I have Rossy Nhung Nguyen with me. She's a senior consultant and a data scientist at IBM. So welcome, Rossy.
Hi, Misra. Thank you for inviting me.
It's very nice to have you here. So let's start with our questions right away. So you are a consultant, and can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a consultant and what your responsibilities are?
Mm-hmm. So I'm a data scientist consultant. It means that I would work together with a team of IBMers, and we would consult a client, and we work in projects of ranging from 2 weeks to 1 year or 5 years. It depends on what sort of projects. But the key thing here is that you will have a certain role, but you also work on a project base.
Okay, that's very interesting. And before we go a little bit further into like what you do, what kind of projects you do, I also want to hear about you. So, how did you end up where you are? What was your journey so far?
Wow, let's see, where should I start? So, to be honest, I'm working as a data scientist right now, but in my study, in my master, I did quantitative risk management. It's a study of you need to predict or dictate the movement and volatility of the financial markets. So that's not really a data science sound like. But during my study, I had a chance to take some extra courses from AI faculty. And from one of the course I did, there was one project that we need to train a car, the simulations, in a simulations to race against other classmates. And from that project, it was a super interesting project, but also it's quite funny because together with my teammate, we both didn't have a driver license, and somehow we end up on the top of the class. So that's kind of convinced me that maybe this is a field that I I should try out.
Okay, that's very cool. And
Yeah.
what did you do after that?
So after that, of course, when I finished my master, I did some more of courses from Coursera.
Mm-hmm.
And because in my study, we also have to do a lot of coding. So it was quite a natural step to switch, or not switch, let's say extend
Mm-hmm.
the study toward a bit more data science related subjects.
Mm-hmm.
So afterward, I just some extra course from Coursera to actually understand what is artificial intelligence or machine learning, and then I applied for a job as a data science consultant, and I got it.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
So basically, just to wrap up, you had a couple of courses during your master's degree, and on top of that, you took some online courses and trained by yourself, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very nice. And what was the topic of these courses that you took? Is it like data science, machine learning?
Yeah, one of the things that I strongly advise is a machine learning. I think now it's a track, but it was a series of courses from Andrew.
Oh yeah, Andrew's courses are amazing.
And he's amazing as a teacher, but also take you through a very difficult subjects or concept. And it's a great teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you also talked about a little bit about why you chose data science. But was there any other reason that brought you to data science other than that project that you did and really enjoyed?
So after that project, for my master thesis, I did a master thesis in the conjunction between AI and financial portfolio management. And there I realized that with the same skill, you can apply it into many different industry, and that's also one of the reasons why I chose data science as let's say as a career, because I see the applicability and also the practicality of that field. You can work in many different industry in many different type of business or tasks using a very similar skill set. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so let's start talking about your work a little bit. So you are a data scientist slash consultant, or a
Mhm.
data scientist consultant.
Yeah.
And I want to know what kind of projects that you do. Can you give us some examples of the projects that you've done so we understand kind of the area and what kind of projects are being done by consultants?
Let me think. Oh yeah, so there's a very interesting project that I think I learned also quite a lot from the insight that we got. Is a project when I work for a big bank, a large bank, and in that project, we our task is understand and also reducing. The aim is reducing the cost of paper transactions. So these paper transactions, so in the Netherlands we call it execute,
Mm-hmm.
is it's like a paycheck, when you need to transfer money to a certain other parties, you will write a check and then you
Mm-hmm.
will send it to the through post to a bank and they will process it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very, let's say, traditional way of doing banking, but now still a lot of people using it. And our task is understand who is using it and can we actually reduce the cost,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very costly to process this paper, even though it's outsourced to a different company. But imagine the amount of paper they have to send out, they have to get back and process, and they have to digitalize it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very costly process for the bank. So in this project, we actually I just learned about this concept because of course I never
Mm-hmm.
used paper transactions, just naturally. Um, but then from this project, I learned that like you can actually segment your customer, understand the reason, like of course identify who are they, where
Mm-hmm.
they live, and not of course in a individual level, but more like which area, but also ask the questions. If you want to reduce number of these customer, what can you do, right? You cannot just say we're going to stop this service, because then most of the customer who using this kind of service will left without no option alternative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the bank cannot do that, but also keeping this process also very costly for the bank. So it's a whole process of predicting what is going to happen in the next few years,
Mm-hmm.
given the historical data, but also what would be the next step, right? So you need to also kind of, it's like a evaluating different scenarios of how to deal with let's say this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
yeah, that's what's
Wow. So then that was a big bank that you work
yeah, yeah.
for that one. Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's kind of typical to work with big corporations when you're a consultant, right?
Hmm.
And they
Hmm.
have very complicated problems that you kind of have to come up with solutions to.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. And also you mentioned that you learned a lot, or like you learned new things while you were in this project. I think that's one of the main positive sides of being a consultant, where
Hmm.
you get to learn about a lot of new domains,
Yeah.
and then maybe you like one of those domains and you want to go and work in that
Indeed.
direction,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I think that's definitely very nice. So you had many projects, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, so far.
Yeah.
And what do you typically deliver at the end of these projects? Is it like a presentation that you give at the end? Is it a piece of code? Like what is the deliverable for a consultant?
I have to say it's depend on each project, but most of the time we work in sprints. So in every 2 weeks we have some sort of, let's say, deliverables, right? And let me think. So in one of the project recently, our main task is developing a model to price the risk of an insurance product, right? So of the insurance customer actually,
Mm-hmm.
and so the deliverables in the end, of course, is the model that able to predict well what type of the risk based on the historical data. But in every sprint, we would have sometime presentation, because we need to like present it to the business owner
Mm-hmm.
who has no background in data science, who know the business really well. So our deliverable at the end we would be how to explain how our model works
Mm-hmm.
in a presentation form, but also in a demo. The other deliverables would be, what would be an Excel sheet of, let's say, replica of our model. So we
Mm-hmm.
code it in R, but then we also have to move the model in a way that is step in Excel, so that people who doing this normal work able to understand how each step of the model how it
Mm-hmm.
work. And then of course sometimes would be documentations as well. But yeah, so I guess it's, you can think of as presentation, documentation, the code, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sometimes it's also a discussion, right? And what, like, people would have a lot of question if they don't understand the model, for instance.
I see.
So
So
yeah,
it's not just one deliverable that you work towards, but it's kind of like a whole experience where
yeah,
you constantly need to deliver things.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I see.
exactly. Yeah.
And I always ask this to people who are in-house data scientists because I'm curious about how projects are being generated inside the company. But for you, of course, this is a little bit of a different question. How do projects happen? Maybe it's a bit more of a business side question. But do
Hmm.
you know how IBM gets its projects?
Um, if I know 100%, then I don't, because of course, because I'm a data science consultant. So usually I would be asked to join a project, or I asked to join a project.
Mm-hmm.
So the project is already there. But sometimes I work on something called RFP. It's a request for proposal.
Mm-hmm.
Is when one client would have a certain task, or let's say certain project idea, goal, and they will ask several vendors, so
Mm-hmm.
like IBM or IBM competitors, and then we will have to submit a certain proposal saying, okay, how do we would we deal with this task? What resources we need? How our solution would look like. Then I joined one of the RFP project once, and yeah, I think so far as that I know that most of the project is going through a partners that would knowing a certain kind of a client needs, and they will bring it back and then ask for RFP from us.
I
Yeah,
see. Okay, so it's like a whole process of
yeah,
okay, where you're not even involved in the first place, and then a project is born, and then you become a part of
indeed,
it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
see. That's very cool. So, can you tell us a bit about what does a normal weekday look like for you? What kind of tasks do you work on? Do you, I don't know, work on Excel? Do you work with Python on a Jupyter notebook? Like, what do you do?
Um, I have to say it again. It's dependent on the project, but
Of
I
course.
know just because all type of project is very different. So my week as a consultant, I think it's also quite typical. So we would have 4 days at the client side, and then one day. So it's usually from Monday to Thursday,
Mhm.
and on Friday we'll be back to the office. And on Friday, most of the time we would do having knowledge sharing sessions or meet up with your colleagues. Also, in the sense that you can discuss a certain challenge that you have during the week, and we can kind of changing knowledge. And so that would be a typical week of consultant. Of course, now it's different because we are in the corona period right now, but we're also trying to keep it up every Friday, meeting with other colleagues
Mhm.
who's not in the same project, of course. Hmm, let me see. If you ask me what my typical day would look like, is uh, I would start my day looking at my Trello, my to-do
Mhm.
list.
Mhm.
And then the next thing I would open is, of course, you have to check your email. But as a data scientist, first thing I would open is Visual Studio Code. I love that tool. Yeah. So I would work. Depend on the project. We sometimes ask to work in Python or R. I think it's kind of like two agnostics, the
Mhm.
programming agnostic.
Mhm.
Just because the fact that yeah, if you work a lot in many different data science projects, you will realize that tooling is just the syntax and command wise, right? So the logic behind it is you who build it, who know it. um yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. And from all these tasks, you also mentioned that you sometimes have meetings, so you develop code also. But like, how do you separate these tasks time wise? Like, how much time does your face to face meetings take, or how much time does your coding actually take?
Mm. Yeah, so I think generally we will start the day with a daily stand up. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes, depend if you have urgency to discuss. And then so that would be the first face-to-face meeting with the client and the team. And afterward, because kind of what tasks you want to do for the day, you discuss in that meeting. Then most of my morning, I like to spend it just on my own with my
Mm-hmm.
doing programming and coding, because I guess that you just need that for the day, right? So
Yeah.
the moment of just yourself. So it's usually I just turn off on my phone, and if I know that I don't have a meeting, and also my yeah, and then just focus on coding. And then usually afterward you would have a kind of checkup, a small checkup call, usually with your team, just to ask like how's it going, do you need any help. And then after, in the end of the day, you're back to coding. So I would be back to coding. At some time, if you need to present, so at the end of the sprint, we need to do a demo, for instance, and then there will be some meeting arranged for that. Yeah.
I see. And how much of your work is people facing? So you already mentioned your meetings for in the morning and also the periodical meetings. But apart from that, how many meetings do you join normally?
Let me think. So if I have to think about percentage wise, probably about 25% would be like people facing. Just I guess it's also a nature of our job. We like look at computer more than people. It's not very true, but it's around 25% of people facing. Yeah.
So you are a consultant data scientist and then you get assigned to projects, but are you part of a bigger team? Like, do you work in a team or do you work individually? How does that happen?
Okay. I'm not gonna start with depend on the project. Okay, some of the project, some of the project I would be in a team. So typically, a project would have project managers. So a product owner, which is usually a client, a data or architect. So depend on it's a data architect if you work a lot more with data gathering projects, a data scientist or data analytics an analyst, and I think a BA business analyst. So that will be a typical, let's say, from my experience, composition of the team. But sometimes you will see like if you have a more senior role within the project, then you also have a senior data scientist or senior business analyst. So that would be the typical composition of the team.
I see. And is it normal to have more than one data scientist?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very normal. Yeah.
Okay. So you already mentioned a couple of tools that you really like Visual Studio Code. Did I get that right?
Yay.
But what are the other tools that you use often,
Um,
including also programming languages?
yeah, so I mentioned Visual Studio Code because it has integrations with GitHub, with Dockers, with with Azure Cloud as well. But also it has also capability to handle like R5 or Python, Jupyter Notebook, for instance. So for programming, I think I try to pack. This is also my recent development as well. I try to pack all of my separate application in one, so I don't have to open like 5 windows at one, right? So this is also why I chose Visual Studio Code because of integrations. There's probably other tools as well. Maybe, would be happy to hear if you know any to try out, of course. But yeah, beside my programming tool, I use a lot of with Slack. If you have a quick chat, and then you would use Slack a lot. And we also use Slack for let's say collaborations. So you have one function like you would have randomly coffee assigned between you and a random team members.
Nice.
Yeah, so this kind of thing is nice because you do it kind of spontaneously. You don't choose it, so that's kind of improve team collaborations. So that's Slack, and I also use OneNote. I use a lot of OneNote for my notes. So when you're meeting, you can also record yourself, and you can also take note, take screenshot, put presentation in there. That's quite nice. And what else do I use? I think that's the.
I think you also mentioned Trello.
Trello, yeah.
Yeah. And for programming languages, do you use Python or R?
Most recently, I use R. My favorite would be Python. So if you had to,
I feel like everyone's favorite is Python.
Exactly. But because we work for the client, so whatever is their there's use language, then we would use that language. Yeah.
Okay, so we came to my favorite questions, and I keep saying this. I feel like people are going to be like, "Okay, Musra, we get it. It's your favorite questions." Okay, so I want to know what the most exciting thing about your job is, or the thing that you enjoy the most about your job.
I have to say, okay, so the thing I enjoy the most about the job is how many random things you can apply, like you can use your skill set for. When I'm saying this is, I think like there's so many things I could try out and do. So currently I'm in a hackathon. We're using AI Fairness 360 on the hackathon on doctor recommendation. So not really in my field. I'm more banking and finance. And at home, I'm setting up a camera to detect a speed detection camera. So that's also I can use my skill set for my job for that, right? And at work, of course, most importantly at work, I'm using my skill set to build a pricing model, for instance. But with the very same pricing model, we well, I use it to not really pricing my own grocery, but to actually categorizing what sort of grocery I'm using for my own banking data, for instance. So I think the reason why I have to say I love my job is the fact that whatever you've been practicing in your job, you can see so many of possibility you can do with it. Whether it's within your job or your normal life or what is going on in your field. It's a very wide range of possibilities. Yeah.
But what about the most boring part of your job?
Oh my God. Okay. If you ask me that, it would be documentations. But it's very important, of course. It's called, yeah, I think one of my mentor, my senior, always telling me you always need to document your knowledge, because and create and bring it to create an asset from it. I understand it though. It's really true, because whatever project you work on, whether a Git repos, it can be created into an asset if you make it general enough, and then the next person can use it. I know that. And of course, a good Git repos, for instance, need a good README file. But to write it up, to actually documenting it, I guess maybe that's the hardest part for me, and that's why I think it's for.
Maybe you just need to imagine yourself as the next person who needs to use that code, that is looking for documentation. Then it will give you motivation to actually write it.
Exactly. Thinking about next generation, so we're not really good at that. Yeah.
And after that, last question: do you have any advice for an aspiring data scientist or someone who wants to become a consultant?
Okay, so let me think. Yeah, if I can do it again, all over again, I would love to document. Very difficult, of course, but also create a proper Git repos for your work. Whether it is, I understand if it's you work in business, if you is of course confidentiality matter. But if you work on your personal project, or you think like, oh, I'm gonna create something small, tiny application just to kind of plotting my spending behavior, of course, because you have time for that, like me. It's really good to document it and create a portfolio for it, because that would be something you can show to yourself, but to also to others, right? When you need to make a case for yourself or need to present yourself, your work is the most important things. So what you created, so always remember to document it. I'm telling myself as well.
So basically, by documenting, you mean that they should have a GitHub account. They should keep all the projects that they did on file, and make sure to explain it on a README file, for example.
Exactly. And it don't need to be, I learned one thing, right? It doesn't need to be like an end-to-end project you need to be there. It's even one script file, and that you write for certain purposes. It is good enough to show yourself, also help yourself structuring your thoughts, structuring your work, for instance, but also for other people to see what you can do, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's kind of like translated into a portfolio now for people who are looking for jobs. It's always like all around internet, people are like, you have to have a portfolio. But it's basically, as you said, whatever work you do, dump it on GitHub. Make sure to explain it a little bit with your sentences. 5 sentences is enough,
Exactly.
Just enough for someone else to understand what was your goal, what did you do, what did you get at the end.
Exactly.
And that's good enough for a future employer to look at your GitHub page and be like, this girl actually knows what she's talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, that was all of my questions, Rossy. Thanks a lot for being here. That was very fun to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
And yeah, I'll see you next time. Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to take my free data science Kickstarter course to learn what it takes to become a data scientist. See you next time.